Hey, Constellation community, got Benjamin Diggles here, co-founder and chief strategy officer. Really, at this point, focused heavily federal and enterprise tends to be my role. So those that don't know me, I lead business development for the company. And I mentioned probably, 6 or 7 weeks ago that I was going to give some updates by the end of January. Not gonna lie, January got ahead of me, even though it's a large month here. So even though it's coming at the end, I didn't want to leave everybody hanging. There's certain things I can't expose, which we'll kind of touch on while we go through this. And this will be brief, but I am dedicated to keeping folks informed where we can. I find this to be, as you all know, some of the most exciting stuff I've ever done, if not the most exciting stuff I've ever done in my career. It's pushing me to a level that is to almost a breaking point, but those that know, I took some much needed time off at the end of last year and really removed myself from the operations of Constellation just to focus on federal, in which I did a few briefings and submitted some very much needed proposals. So just as a quick recap, what we're talking about here briefly is an update on SPIDR, which is what we call the program, the Universal Blockchain Toolkit. It's going to have a lot of different names, but for those that are inside the federal walls that are exploring blockchain, when they think blockchain, they think of SPIDR being the program that Constellation had created, which I believe is going to be the foundation for something much larger than just our protocol, because as you well know, I don't believe there's one protocol to rule them all. That said, the SPIDR stands for Secure Peer-to-Peer and Immutable Data Resilience, in which we are partnered with Kinemy, as well as a few others I'm not allowed to talk about, but I will say this is super exciting, right? And this is stuff that takes gestation period, takes a while. And so I do push back on anybody that's in the community kind of expecting this to be coin operated. You just do this, it leads to the next thing. This is intricate, very, very intricate beyond imagination. That said, we're holding on. We're doing a great job. And so a lot of these slides may look familiar to some folks. I've shown some of them in the past, but I think they kind of ground this. I'm not going to do a full review on this, but why this is exciting is that this is end-to-end data security. This is foundational. There's a lot of things that come out of quote-unquote blockchain technology when you start looking at the application layer, the use cases. We're bringing infrastructure, true infrastructure. We're trying to augment that existing legacy infrastructure to utilize the core principles of blockchain. And we believe, of course, Constellation, being as scalable and as secure and decentralized as it is a perfect place to hang their hat on when it comes to exploring this type of technology. This use case in specific is largely infrastructure, and that's why this is going to take some time. This isn't a point solution in which we're saying, hey, we can fix this one thing with this widget that makes the problem go away, but rather, how do we kind of strip this down to its bare bolts, if you will, or the studs, and rebuild with a different way and a different approach in mind. And you can see that with a lot of the projects that are building on top of Constellation. If you look at like Alchemy as an example, they're taking on one of the largest behemoth industries out there, which is advertising. And you don't do it by just adding some stuff on to change that entire industry. You have to go back down to the guts and really figure out how you're going to orchestrate this with these new networks that are doing things properly that we aren't seeing from Web 2 technologies today. So that said, I'm really excited about this, because when you look at securing legacy and future command and control mission plan and system data exchanges, I know it's a mouthful, but what that means is you've got a lot of data that's being passed around different entities within the federal government, but there's also, more importantly, a lot of data that's being passed outside, and that's a very porous network of threat vectors, man-in-the-middle attacks. I mean, it's just laden with a lot of security holes, as which we've seen day in and day out from some of the mishaps that have taken place up to date, both in the commercial but also in the federal space. So just to kind of shill Constellation a little bit, why we keep getting these wins and why we keep being embraced by the federal government is, we are a third generation blockchain. We have solved those fundamental drawbacks of those market leaders. We believe, again, the space is growing. There's room for many more. But that said, one of the things they're really excited about when we look at that second bullet is that energy efficiency of our network. As it scales, it becomes more efficient. which to me is huge, right? We've already gone toe-to-toe with them to show that our network is more efficient than the status quo in which they're orchestrating data exchanges today. And that's huge, right? Because everybody thinks that Bitcoin's nuking the planet and so forth, and that since we're blockchain, we must be doing the same, which is not the case, right? When you think about the trilemma, the blockchain trilemma of speed, security, as well as that decentralization, you know, scaling usually is where you start to lose that security. Scaling is really hard to maintain security at scale, but that's why Constellation continues to be put at the front and center of these tough issues from an infrastructure level involving distributed ledger technology. The third bullet there is collaboration focus. So if you are what you would consider a competitor in the space and you're watching this, hit me up. Let's bring you in. I'm more than happy to make introductions and bring you into the space, because as you'll see, the world's first L0 protocol, and I don't think it really matters if we're the world's first, as much as it is that we're dedicated to it, and that's one of our secret sauces that really makes us different in this market, is our ability to interact and interoperate with other blockchain solutions. Us being legacy system compatible is extremely important. You know, the fact that we have to go in there and say, hey, we're not looking for you to rip up and replace your existing infrastructure, but we're here to augment it, right? How do we take, say, a central server and split it up into many servers that are nodes? So you're, say, pay $1,000 for one central server. Now you're paying $10, you know, for 100 different servers. And so that's an augmentation to existing infrastructure investments versus us saying, hey, you have to actually plug something new in that you've never done before outside of the protocol. We do talk about being quantum attack ready. There's a lot of interest in that, and being able to orchestrate and secure top secret level data even when under those attacks. So that is extremely important that we were able to bolster that when we approached the federal government. I do like this blue box over to the right, and I want this to kind of sink into folks, how easy it is. And I know the devil's in the details, so I don't want to make it seem too easy, but we're really talking about deploying these private DoD blockchains in just 5 easy steps. You know, and as we know, the software development kit is coming out for the public and prime time here rather soon. But when it comes to the DoD, they install this, they own this SDK. This is theirs to augment and use as they see fit. Of course, we produce that SDK to interact with the data types, right? That's where you configure your data types through state channels to be able to validate the data required to ensure the security of that core orchestration. And so you only need 3 virtual machine nodes to get consensus rolling, get the thing up and running. Of course, naturally, we really implore folks to deploy more nodes, but when it comes to just getting the thing started for configuration, it's rather lightweight. You know, number 4 in this list is also devil's in the details. When you integrate the API and you start to connect integrated systems or required systems, and that could be smart contracts, that could be really any of these legacy systems that need to come on board and interact with the network. And then at the very last is you know, replacing HTTPS calls with HGTP. And this is where their palms have gotten really sweaty, which I'll explain here in a moment. But what we achieved in the first phase 2 effort, you know, I've talked a little bit about this, just reaffirming this because I'm so proud and I can't even express how much work this is, but it's working, right? We're being accepted with open arms. This is no longer mission critical. I'm sorry, this is no longer nice to have. They see it as mission critical now. But if you look at this as a layer cake, the first thing we really showed them, because I think it's key, is like, can we still scale data orchestration securely in a decentralized fashion? And we showed with the command and control data communication that data in transit, we, you know, through a man-in-the-middle attacks, corrupted missing data, spoofing attempts, and showed them this is unhackable, which is huge, right? Because if you think about that, once that data is validated, you now have a trustless network. And that is what feeds that top layer when you see secure smart contracts, is they don't have to worry about the data being secured or validated because the network's taking care of that. So what we did is we deployed a multi-author mission data smart contract within the Civil Reserve Air Fleet partner environment to show them how this worked. And it garnered a ton of excitement because everybody sort of gets smart contracts. You know, it's a smart name, right? It's like a smartphone, right? It does some things that are either automated or secured. And I always say, hey, this is where mathematical proof and code is law enforces those that are participating on that smart contract. And in the middle there, of course, we built a standardized integration with Kinemy around the data and storage, because Constellation does not store any of the data on our change, only a hashing of the metadata that is in relation to the validation criteria telling it what it's supposed to do. So therefore, we wanted to make sure this was end-to-end, and we're pretty tied at the hip when it comes to Kinemy and federal, because there's not a single use case in which they don't want to have that extra layer of encryption with data that has been sharded, that is going to be at rest and be secured. So, and of course, I mentioned this, and this is one of the things I was super excited about and proud of. All of our milestones were successfully completed, validated by the Air Force Research Laboratory, and we've been told Iron SPIDR is the lead blockchain program in federal. We're the lead Husky right now. That said, it's because we're collaboration focused, so try not to think of the lead as a competitor, but somebody who's a guiding light of the art of what's possible when it comes to interoperating technologies openly versus what we've experienced in the past, which is largely walled gardens that compete against each other, and it really slows everybody down. So what is next? A lot of folks keep talking about phase 3, and yes, that is the next obvious progression, and we have many irons in the fire, not to use a pun on Iron SPIDR, when it comes to phase 3. But remember when I mentioned the HTTPS or HTTPS being switched over to HGTP? We started going after some of this these production systems and saying, all right, we're just going to make this switch over to HTTP, and a lot of people freaked out, but for good reasons. This was, I would say, it's sort of like getting attention, like going into a restaurant and breaking a glass. It forces somebody to come over and have to help you. This was us pushing up against folks that may have not been paying attention to make them uncomfortable, to say, hey, this is real. We're getting buy-in and support by the right constituents. You got to take this serious. And so everybody's like, whoa, 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 don't start pointing things at HGTP just yet. We need to make sure that it's compliant and regulated and on, going through the right channels of what the Department of Defense does to make sure that it's, defensive, right? So to explain that, I'll end on that here at the bottom here in a moment, but what's next in the Iron SPIDR contract, and this is one contract specific. We have many more, but this is one that I'm the most excited about because I think it's got blazing the trail as a foundational layer that applications and a lot of other use cases are going to be born from, versus us having to start all the way back at the beginning improving security on an application. The security that we've demonstrated in this phase 2 that I just touched on comes out of the box, right? And so now we're working on Iron SPIDR blockchain secure data exchange that is focused on that Civil Reserve Air Fleet partner. Now, while they were running a multi-authored secure smart contract within their environment, we now have to figure out how do we do secure commercial communications and start to move this data around freely. While we were able to prove some of that from a basic level, now it's a little bit different when you start to open things up. And again, this is what makes people a little nervous, so it's not just about a technology push. Can our technology do it? Sure, but you have to sell the right people to get access to their operational views, their system views, really how they orchestrate their stuff and get buy-in, which we now have, and I'm very proud of that. So we also want to continue smart contract automation and start preparing for microservices. We believe the future is microservices focused, but smart contracts are always going to somehow play a role, whether it's in a small use cases or they become instrumental. We believe not only they play a massive role in getting buy-in, but they also are going to solve a lot of technology needs that microservices will replace in the future. But for now, we're really focused on an agnostic shared smart contract framework application, which I will be announcing later on, but that's not something that we believe Constellation should hold the keys to, but rather that we should contribute and collaborate with other blockchain solutions so that, much like the Universal Blockchain Toolkit, as part of it comes a myriad or a series of smart contracts that have been blessed and used for different use cases. That third one down is probably what I'm the most excited about, which is the L0 blockchain interoperability, starting to pass data from HGTP to other approved chains, such as IBM's Hyperledger Fabric, right? That's already being used by Maersk and TradeLens within the federal government for supply chain management and digital logistics. So why wouldn't we use that as one of our first ones to prove interoperability? And I'm not going to announce what the others are at this moment, but to me, once we prove this, we then really secure our place as the blockchain of blockchains, right? Things roll into the Iron SPIDR program, and if you want to interoperate, you run on HGTP's L0, which I think is huge. That really kind of brings forth that spider, right? And then the last thing, which I've already sort of touched on a little bit, is the DISA and NIST compliance approval. Again, they're not going to allow sensitive government data to pass through HGTP until HGTP has been, basically vetted and compliant for that data to pass through it for good reasons, right? And that is not something all the money in technology in the world isn't going to speed that process up. That said, they are truncating this process since they understand that it's a very long one. Sometimes it takes companies up to 36 months or 3 years, if you will, to be able to go through that. But this is paramount. And this allows for us to truly not just be an off-the-shelf point solution, we use this for this, but rather we use this for everything. This means if the Department of Homeland Security, Customs Border Patrol, anybody that wants accountability or wants security or notarized data at scale, just from a foundational level, can go to their DevSecOps and easily rapid test and deploy because it's now been vetted for the entire federal space. And when you think about that mixed with L0 blockchain interoperability, this puts us in a very unique place from an infrastructure standpoint to be the industry leader. So just to give a little example of kind of the momentum for those that want to do a little research on this piece, this is mission critical alignment. It's not necessarily the sexiest or the most fun work, but for some people that are nerdy like me, I find it wildly exciting. So you can check out disa.mil or nist.gov/blockchain and see a little bit about how they vet and essentially regulate new technologies like us coming in to be essentially made for production and to be used by the federal government. So I just want to explain this piece because it's something that I think folks need to understand, that no matter how much blessing, even though last week I was in DC presenting to the Defense Innovation Unit, 2 weeks prior to that, I was literally on the phone with Secretary of Defense office presenting Iron SPIDR. I am at the top of the top working with folks that really want to push this forward, but you can't just skip past something that I believe would be a detriment if technologies aren't vetted through these respectable programs. So the vision of the Universal Blockchain Toolkit, or KIT, if you want to call it Iron SPIDR, these are all interoperable names for this open mission-critical blockchain and crypto infrastructure sandbox vision. And there's more names on here that we've been adding over time that I haven't really kept this up because we don't need to expose them at this time. But we are still in the trenches with everyone from last year and the year prior. These relationships continue to get deeper. And I couldn't be more proud of working alongside so many positive graph-based decentralists. So I'm going to leave you on this. Here's the federal themes for 2023. And I am dedicated to doing more, as you'll see from that kind of italicized copy at the bottom. I do want to share more, but we have to be very sensitive. I know the thirst of the community and other folks is great. That said, we do not want to compromise our placement in this because this is sensitive stuff. It's not so much that we're nervous about sharing stuff around Constellation, but we can't share stuff around our partners and the agencies and the constituents that we're engaged with at the federal level. So these are our themes for 2023. The first being on-chain data exchanges driven by HGTP at scale. I think that's huge. That's something we've already started to do. I put 3 fire emojis next to the L0 interoperability. To me, I think that is like one of the things that will be one of the greatest moments in blockchain history, and so I'm super excited about that. As I mentioned, through DISA and NIST, regulatory compliance is a major theme this year and will be for the next 2 or 3 years as we grow into this space even deeper. Something I haven't talked about on this, and I'm going to keep my cards close to my chest, and I'm working strategically with Altif on this, which is space and satellite security and our involvement with Space ISAC, and how do we bring our knowledge and research to real-world solutions. And we're going to see how that's going to dovetail with SPIDR, STTR, as well as other programs like Air Force Research Laboratory and so forth. And we are really proud to be working with primes such as Lockheed and Kratos Defense and so forth. Of course, we're going to have the deepening of our strategic federal partnerships. We're going to be making some announcements this year that are very real, but we're keeping those close to our chest for now. And the last thing I'm going to say is our use case expansion through new contracts. We're exploring some pretty cool use cases, such as how do you put common access cards or clearance cards on a ledger that is a digital twin, and using an NFT and a wallet to sign and get access to your clearance card as an extra layer of validation for things such as identity access management. Again, these are applications that are on top of the blockchain, and without us doing what we did with the fundamentals in the last 3.5 years around proving the base layer, we wouldn't even be exploring these use cases. So use cases like that NFT example for common access cards. I was on the phone with some constituents talking about securing audio and visual data, such as streaming services and communication services, so that they're validated, so things like espionage and spoofing of audio can't take place, and so forth. And so that's it. I mean, I could keep talking because, as you know, I'm super excited about this stuff, and I'm in it every single day. And even though this last few years has been really a lot of burnout, I'm more on fire now than I've ever been. So everybody strap in and get excited, because we're about to enter an exciting year. So yeah, I guess hit me up if you have any questions that I can answer. And per usual, I appreciate everybody's support. Thank you.